Well, welcome, Paula. It's great to have you on the show. Do you want to tell me a little bit about yourself? And let's kind of kick this off. This will be an interesting episode, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Thank you so much for having me. So basically, I'm just a nerd who's really good at school. I'm a lawyer, but I'm also a licensed clinical mental health therapist. But I'm a mom. I have four kids. And, I have a new book that just dropped called Tumbleweeds that's basically all about my kids and how I got them and how law and social work and mental health and everything just sort of converges with being a parent.
Well, one of the things we love to talk about, Paula, is systems and how do we navigate complicated systems. And I can only imagine as a mental health therapist and a lawyer exactly how you approach navigating systems, because a lot of our work is looking at the dysfunction within the system and helping people who don't necessarily understand or have the tools to find their way forward. And so what have you learned through your journey? And then you writing a book about how you navigated and kind of took on some of those systems.
So, the most helpful thing that I think I can tell people who are trying to navigate that is that it's like eating an elephant because it's a huge system, just like an elephant is huge. And you're going to have to take it one plate at a time and one bite at a time. And you might need to take some breaks, right? Like Rome was not conquered in a day. And so some of the time you're just going to have to say, all right, what can I do today that will be helpful? And let me get through with that. And then if it works out great, wonderful, then I'll go to the next plate. If it doesn't work out because of some reason that's beyond my control, that's really unfortunate, but I'm going to sleep and go to bed and come back tomorrow and fight again. So it really is understanding that you have to chop it up and take it one day at a time and one plate at a time.
Yeah, what do you suggest to folks? Because it takes a lot of coaching sometimes. I think about, you talk a lot about advocacy, and how advocates can step in and help others. How do we find those connections? Because I know so oftentimes, whether we're talking about kids or adults or sometimes aging parents, trying to figure things out can be very challenging. How have you found helpful to figure things out?
So, a lot of communities have nonprofits that are there to help you. So, I always encourage people to just, whatever your need is, just do a quick Google search of your zip code, your city, your state, and then what you need. Like, IEP advocates, school advocates, that type of thing. An advocate and a lawyer are not the same thing in that type of a space. Like sometimes you need an experienced teacher or an experienced mother or father who's done this before to go with you to those types of things. So, usually just an online search. Some of the time, services like that are free and hosted by nonprofits or mental health agencies, and you don't even have to pay for it. So when you feel hopeless, again, let those hopelessness feelings pass and come back to fight another day and just keep chipping away. Sometimes it's just a matter of getting to the right person at the right time.
Yeah, and it can seem so overwhelming, like you talked about earlier. Let's talk about your own experiences. I'm especially interested in the work you've done with IEPs. Having a son that we spent a lot of time in 504 meetings, I can relate to some extent of how difficult and challenging that system is. My wife happens to be a licensed mental health counselor. I'm a trained therapist, worked in the system, and we struggled to navigate the system, Paula. And so how has this system become so complicated that regular people really can't even sort through it?
So I'm glad that you asked that because that was actually something I was going to bring up if you didn't ask it. You know how we have this statement that you hear in America sometimes, and we usually hear it about banks, like the banks are too big to fail.
Mhm.
Well, unfortunately, what I'm seeing is that the school systems are so big, they are inevitably going to fail because they're too big and it is unmanageable. Like, I live in a county outside of Charlotte called Cabarrus County, North Carolina. We are essentially Charlotte's bedroom. And I believe to my soul that Charlotte Mecklenburg schools and Cabarrus County schools are so big that they are almost destined to fail because there's too many people in those systems for the services that they have. I see smaller districts like Kannapolis City Schools, which is a district beside of us, that is so much smaller and they do such a much better job. And they have kids with high poverty rates, but they're doing a better job because they have a more appropriate number of professionals to children so they can actually serve people. North Carolina's been trying to do, 100 counties, 100 systems. I think that's a terrible idea. I think that's an abysmal idea. And that's also driving people to private schools and charter schools and religious schools, which sometimes they're better, but sometimes they're worse. And that's not helpful either. So I really think that we need to have our state legislatures reimagine the way that education for our children is supposed to look, because what we're doing right now nationally is a failure. But to talk about my own experience, first of all, I think that everything is worse when it's your own kid. So
Yes.
my oldest child was born with complete bilateral cleft lip and palate. So half of his nose, his whole upper lip, the roof of his mouth did not exist when he was born. So he is 12 now, but he has had about 6 surgeries. I wrote about all that in my book if anyone's interested to hear more about the cleft palate journey. But one of the biggest things that my son needed was help learning to speak. Because you can imagine if you're born without a roof in your mouth, you're not going to be able to speak. So my son also has a high IQ. So when he was 3, he was naming 40 some dinosaurs because he knew their words. But I mean, the speech that he was producing, I could understand him. I knew what he was saying. But strangers who met my son had no idea. And so he needed speech therapy, understandably. So I enroll him in or I try to enroll him in speech therapy through the public school because my anticipation is that this is a team. This is a village. This is the Hillary Clinton quote. We are all here to do what is in the best interest of this poor 3-year-old who was born without a roof in his mouth. And what I found was the opposite. Anything they could do to not be helpful, I found. Any door they could choose to slam in my face, I found. Any ridiculous argument that they could find to blow me and my child off, I found. And I was deeply frustrated as a parent because, first of all, Pratley was my first child. He was a very wanted and planned child. And I knew about the cleft palate from the time I was 4 months pregnant. So I spent months 5 through 9 of my pregnancy literally reading, processing, and understanding every medical journal. I've literally read over 700 medical journals about cleft lip and palate. Fun fact, I was largely doing it because I was trying to figure out what part of this was my fault. Now,
Mm,
intellectually, we know none of this was my fault, but getting your heart to agree that as a special needs parent is different. So I read all this stuff. I had all this information, and these people were clueless. I mean, they had no idea about anything. So I left these meetings feeling unheard. I left them feeling angry. I'm a lawyer with 4 law licenses, and I left one of those meetings crying so hard from sheer anger that I puked in a coffee cup in a CVS parking lot, and I
yeah.
sued them the next day. So
Yeah.
I say that to say if you are a mother experiencing this, you are not alone. It does not matter your education level. Sometimes this is just what happens. It doesn't matter what your child is facing or how sympathetic your situation is. Sometimes this happens. I also want to tell you that in retrospect, I don't know how helpful suing was. I don't know that if I had it to do over again, I would have sued. We settled out of court for an amount of money I'm not allowed to disclose. They tried to make me sign something saying I wouldn't even disclose that I sued, but I refused to do that because I have a First Amendment right to tell you that you suck and that I sued you and to write a book about it and to go
Yeah.
on the podcast and still talk about it because I'm still mad about it 9 years later. But what I did do is redirect my efforts and get my child the help that he needed on my own. I stopped relying on the system to be able to help me because it was clear they didn't understand and they didn't want to help. And Jason, this brings me to another serious problem in America, other than the complexities of our systems, which is income inequality.
Yes.
One of the things that I find the most devastating is that if you are from a wealthy family, and you're not getting what you need from a school system, you can afford to sue, or you can afford to go privately pay for speech therapy or OT or PT or whatever your child needs. If you have Medicaid, most of the time you're also okay because Medicaid will usually fund a provider who can give it to you. But if you're our middle class or our working poor, you're just screwed. And
Mm.
I see so many children who now have profound speech impediments at 10, 11, and 12, or who can't read at 10, 11, and 12 because their dyslexia didn't get taken care of when they were 7, who are now going to be hindered for life, or who are going to get this fixed, but it's going to be an uphill and more expensive battle because we simply didn't prioritize people between 3 and 6. And we
Well,
should have a culture that does that.
absolutely. As you were talking, I was just thinking to myself about, we live in a society of have and have nots, and a lot of it has to do with those who are articulate enough to advocate for themselves and know how to open those doors. Because you have to open door after door to get your needs met. And as I think about the continuum of disabilities, I think about behavioral health disabilities that you can't see. Your son's disability was in speech and able to communicate. So it was something people could see and understand, where it's even harder when it's hidden disabilities and trauma and PTSD and depression and anxiety. And I could go through the list that you see when you walk through a school, and those things aren't being addressed, and it's impacting children's ability to be educated, right? All
Hurting
the
everyone. Yes.
it's hurt, absolutely hurting everyone. And it almost seems overwhelming to me, and I do this work every day. And so, you've channeled your energy into writing the book and being out here and talking to people. What do we need to do differently? What should we be talking to our legislators about so that they can start to take up this issue?
Smaller digestible systems, number one. Number two, appropriate funding for children, understanding how speech OTPT helps, a literacy curriculum that involves phonics and that isn't this national failure that we have. There's no reason why American high schools should have 57% reading proficiency. There's so many things that if we could fund, we could fix. And what I really want our state legislatures to understand is that there is a pipeline to prison, 100%. And that pipeline to prison is this stuff. It's this stuff not being handled. The youth mental health problem, everyone is going to have a mental health problem if you feel dumb. The way to fix that is to invest in these kids. There should be nothing that we would not offer our children and our grandchildren to help them be the best humans that they are. And yet, I have to say this to people. This is not even a conversation that you and I should be having to have, Jason. And it's not a conversation that's had in Scandinavian countries and parts of Europe. Why we have to tell people fund the least among us so that they can grow up to be responsible, functioning, tax-paying citizens is beyond me. It is idiocy, but yet we're having to do it all the time. Honestly, in my core, I believe some of the time that child welfare has been a women's issue for so long that we can't get financially focused men, no offense, to pay attention. And I'm here to tell you that's where you're messing up. Like, we need to focus on our kids because when we don't focus on the kids, it comes back to bite us in 20 years.
Yeah, I really appreciate, I'm a farmer, fifth generation row crop farmer in Iowa, Paul. I'm sure you know that. But really what you're talking about is getting back to community. I mean, we spend a lot
Yes,
of time talking about community, right? And you're talking about, instead of being these huge systems, how do we get back to local control? How do we get back to local communities supporting each other, neighbors helping neighbors,
yes.
educating our kids together in our small towns, as opposed to consolidating and bigger and bigger and bigger. It's kind of like we've gone from Main Street to Walmart, but that's not really helpful in us connecting as a community. And actually, we're probably beyond Walmart now into Amazon delivery. But I think but we don't run into people in the aisles of when we go out shopping anymore, right? And that's
No,
what builds
and we
community,
don't, we avoid people. We have
right?
whole communities where neighbors don't know neighbors. Jason, as a fun fact, I also own a flower farm.
Okay.
Um, my law firm is in my great grandpa's old turkey farmhouse. And
Oh,
then
wow.
Yeah, and then I own the land across the road that was my grandma's, and so I actually have a flower farm out of there. So I'm from a huge agricultural family too. Like when I was a child, my community had 50,000 people in it, and most
Yeah,
of us farmed. Now we're Charlotte's bedroom, and we have almost 250,000 people, and that
yeah.
population swell has also been huge, and not in a good way. It's bigger than we can manage.
That's awesome, and I'm glad I know a flower farmer now. I don't think I know I have any flower farmers in my Rolodex, so I'm gonna have to get down there and see the flower farm sometime.
I
Well,
love
Paul,
flower farming. It's beautiful.
it sounds like it. This has been a great conversation. I think there's so much to take away from this. Do you have any final thoughts you want to leave people with today?
I just want to tell people that I understand how exhausting this is, and I understand how mad it makes you. Obviously, I just got mad talking to Jason about it. Like, I get that. But I also want to tell you that there's so much hope. Like, my children, three of my four children have had some stuff, right? And all of them are thriving now. So there is hope. And you, as mom and dad, have every reason to invest in your children because there's nothing more important than that. And if somebody treats you or your child like trash, you just need to remember that you have one job, and that job is to be the best parent you can be. And just if you're burned out, go to bed and get up the next day and try to think, what part of this elephant can I tackle next? Because you can do this.
I don't think there's any better advice than that. Thank you so much, Paula, for being with us. Take care.
Thanks, thanks for having me, Jason. Bye.
Wow, everyone, what a wonderful conversation that was with Paula. I'm so sorry I couldn't be able to join you for that. It sounds like that was an amazing conversation, and I'm really looking forward to her book. It's called Tumbleweeds, where it sounds like she talks all about the situation with dealing with her kids and special needs in the IEPs. I really am challenged by her ideas about the large school systems and how they're not able to function the way they should, and how navigating them because they're so large has become so cumbersome. That's a really interesting take on redoing the school systems around the country. And so I think there's a lot that we can take away from that for something to really dive into because our folks with special needs really seem to fall through the cracks in those really large systems. But before we go today, I just want to remind you of the Recovering Politician Self-Care Policy of the Week. Life is too short for bad books. Now, you may not think that bad books get published. My friends, right now with AI, lots of bad books are getting published, but not all books are bad. It might not be the right season for you. It might not be a time that you really need to read a certain book. And maybe this season isn't even the right time or the right place or even a book that's relevant to your season. It's okay. Step away from the book. Do you know I will never have the time to read all the books out there that I'm interested in? My want to read list is so long. So if you're not really getting into a book this season, just put it down. Life's too short for bad books. Well, guys, thanks for listening today. Please don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and all other social media channels. If you give us a positive review, we'll send you a prize. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk soon.